Coming up on the Middle Class VO Podcast.
After doing the first 3 books with Scott, I said, I don't think anyone has ever written a book with an audiobook narrator as the main character set in the framework of a psychological thriller. And I said, I think that I can make that work.
Well, if you need e-learning, we're just an email away. Call up and listen, tell us what to say. Explain the video, image and radio. Slang local cars, reading IBRs. No, it ain't no stars. No, we're the Middle Class VO Podcast. The Middle Class VO Podcast.
Welcome to the Middle Class VO Podcast. It is a very exciting episode today and a unique episode today. It's Kevin Kilpatrick here and
Bobby Maxwell in Cincinnati. It's unique because, well, first off, we haven't talked about audiobooks on the podcast in probably over a year, but it was the situation where an author reached out and said, hey, love to be on your podcast, and his book was about audiobook narrators. So we've got both of them. Landon Beach is the amazing author, and just top-notch audiobook narrator Scott Brick joins us too. So 2 in 1 today.
welcome, gentlemen. Welcome.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us on, Kevin and Bobby. It's great to be here today.
Absolutely. Now, the burning question, we're talking with Landon Beach, and he is a novelist, author, and Scott Brick, the audiobook narrator that narrated Landon's latest novel called Narrator. And it's a unique situation, and it's all about our lives. And Bobby and I just finished this book, and it is thrilling. It keeps you on the edge of your seat. But the first question I have for these gentlemen today is, what is Booth Dick?
It's a very serious condition, Kevin.
You have no idea.
You don't want to have, and you need to get to a hospital right away if you have any kind of an inkling that it's going on.
You should get down on your knees and thank God that you don't know what it is.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Industry secret.
Oh, but Landon, if you would, give us a synopsis of Narrator, please.
Sure. So the book starts off where you have a main character named Sean Frost, who is a performing arts prodigy, who is a 2-time Tony Award-winning playwright and actor in his 20s in New York City. And as his height and fame continue to grow, so do his flaws. And after something goes wrong in New York City, he travels cross-country to Carmel by the Sea to reinvent himself as an audiobook narrator. And as he starts to grow a following and get more books that are getting a lot of attention, his fame starts to grow, but also his flaws start to come back until one day he is possibly kidnapped by 2 obsessed fans that love his work, and they have written a book and they want Sean to narrate it for them. And so I think I'll stop there, and then things take off from that point.
Awesome. Scott, there are more twists and turns in this book than a 5-minute roller coaster ride. So do you typically read the manuscript, especially on thrillers? Do you read it first?
I read the manuscript every time I can, and that's sounds like I'm hedging my bets. I'm walking the fence here. There are times I don't have time to read them in advance. I have a really great, just a top-notch research team who sometimes they have to read the book for me and give me like an 8-page, very detailed synopsis, some book report, essentially. It's a lot easier for me to, I can spend an hour reading 8 pages, or I can spend 20 or 30 hours because I'm a very slow reader, depending on the size of the book, reading something in advance. With this book, I absolutely read it in advance because it was so personal. And I say personal, even though I didn't write it, bless him, Landon always had me in mind for this, and we talked about it so many times that I thought the only way I can do this book justice is to read it in advance, of course. But also because Landon asked me to. He asked me for feedback. Were these details about the booth correct? He sent me an email a week before the book came out. We did the audio and the print version at the same time, a co-pub, and it was a week beforehand, and the book was already recorded and it was already written, and obviously, and he said, "Is it appropriate to say? Do you ever say in the booth, I hit the record button?" He said, "Is that a thing?" And it really made me think. I went, it kind of isn't, because it's not hardware. I'm not hitting a button on a machine, right? Mm-hmm. It's software, and there is a button on. It's a macro, that I've programmed into Pro Tools, the system I use. But yeah, I hit the number 3 key in order to start recording, but I don't usually say I hit the record button. Landon gets back to me and he says, "Do you say I hit record?" And I said, "Yes, all the time." So he made that adjustment. It was the tiniest little thing. Taking out 2 words, taking out the and button. I hit record. And yet the book is better because of it.
Absolutely. Now,
I could say, Kevin and Bobby, I think Hemingway said that, writing is never done. It's just due. And those are the things that keep an author up at night. By this point, I've gone over it a million times. Scott and I have had conversations. We've had Zooms, just an incredible experience that I don't know if I will ever have again to this level, just because of the nature of the work. And that's what happened. I'm reading it again, saying maybe just one more time. And then that just pops up and you think you've got it, but I'm thinking, do I have this right? And Scott, got right back to me, and we were able to make those adjustments at the end, just, to try to get it as close as possible, so that both the common audience who does not work in the industry would enjoy it for the psychological thriller aspects, and maybe learning a little bit about audiobook narration that they didn't know before, but also for professionals in the industry, because I've said that it really ended up being a love letter from me to storytellers. And an Easter egg that we had too was, I of course wanted to dedicate this to Scott, just as the beautiful friend that he is to me, and what he means to me, and what he's meant to the industry. And I've been listening to him for years, and so I dedicated it to him. And of course, Scott was like, "I can't read this, Landon," but he ended up hiring his really close friend Ray Porter to help us out, and I thought that was just a neat thing for him to do that in the author's note at the end. So there were all kind of circumstances that just came up because of this that we did not see, and kind of went on the fly due to the nature of the work.
That was actually a really funny week when that was all going on, because he sends me the manuscript, and I see the dedication, which was lovely, and then at the end of the book, in the author's note, he talks about the process of, going back and forth and doing the research and asking for my input. And he was just laudatory in both the beginning and the end of the book. And I said, "Landon, I don't need any help to seem self-centered." I really cannot read these things myself. So I reached out to Ray, and thankfully he's one of my dearest friends, as well as the narrator of the Audiobook of the Year at the Audio Awards last year. And he said, "Okay, I'll read this," which, by the way, technically I have now paid a friend of mine to say nice things about me. But the other thing that cracked me up was he said, "Okay, I'll read this version, but I'm going to record my version as well." And it was just so foul, so profane. He's like, "What can we say about, Scott Brick other than, he is an utter tool, but just between you and me." He didn't use the word tool. He said a word you're really not supposed to use. And this went on for like 90 seconds. I wound up sending it to Landon.
Oh,
I had
funny.
tears in my eyes. It was
Oh
just
my God, it was so
but
fun.
it was poetic too. It was.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was so literary. It just blew me away.
Oh, Landon, how did you clearly you have intimate knowledge of what goes on, and I know you consulted and everything, but where did the idea come from to write a psychological thriller about Audiobook Narrator?
Well, I have wanted to tell an entertainment comeback story or some kind of thriller suspense novel set in the entertainment industry for about 20 years. And I could never figure out how to do it. And what I mean by that is there has been so much done, whether it's authors in peril or a director or a disc jockey, anything like that. And so, especially in this day and age, you've got to give the audience something new, something that they haven't seen before, and yet hit certain story beats that make you feel that you're in familiar turf and territory so that you can enjoy it. And I just go back to growing up watching film after film, and I studied film in college and got a degree in screenwriting. So that's very much of a home for me, as well as my love of books and literature. And so I had 4 films that just stood out to me in terms of what kind of experience I wanted to provide for a reader or listener one day. And it was Vertigo, Play Misty for Me, Misery,
Nice.
and A Beautiful Mind. And then I had a short story that I used to teach actually when I was a high school language arts teacher called The Continuity of Parks by Julio Cortázar. And imagine those 5 things kind of like ingredients in a soup that was in my mind for all those years. And then finally it came to me one day after doing the first 3 books with Scott. I said, I don't think anyone has ever written a book with an audiobook narrator as the main character set in the framework of a psychological thriller. And I said, I think that I can make that work. And there were certain creative decisions that I had to make in order to make that work, because we've all laughed before about this in some of our conversation before the Zoom, and certainly Scott and I have, but your mere existence as an author and a narrator too, it's so damn lonely. I'm in this office that I'm in right now, 12, 13 hours a day writing, struggling, and there's no one around, but it's really difficult to make that dramatic. Like he picked up the pencil and he thought maybe he would write. It's ridiculous. And Scott, was telling me about just, the butt in the seat. You've got to put in the work, and it's by yourself. And it's a lot that I learned too, researching for the book. And so getting inside a narrator's mind, though, and using that became very attractive in order for the bones of the story to put it out. So that's how it came about. Before I approached Scott about would he be interested in going after this one with me.
Well, the writing was so accurate about our industry that Kevin and I we texted a couple times and we actually talked on the phone. We really thought it was Scott because we'd heard that Scott was also writing, wanted to write books. So we thought maybe it was just an alias, and you got us.
Well, it's like Kurt Vonnegut responded to a fan letter of criticism one time, and he said, I am Kurt Vonnegut. I am real. Although, Scott has said for years about maybe a book about audiobook narrating, and I know he has a novel in there too, and I'm like, man, I want to see those come out.
Absolutely. So one of the favorite parts of the book was to hear these names in the industry that we recognize, and Scott, didn't you actually say your own name at one point?
Yeah, I think it happened. Well, I was referenced a couple of times. Once I remember specifically by name. At the beginning of the book, there's a scene at the Audio Awards where Sean Frost, the character I'm playing, he walks past a table And sitting at the table are me, my girlfriend, Susanna Lee Freeman, Pat Fraley, one of my dearest friends I've ever had, Ray Porter, and Simon Vance. This is my social life, basically. These four people other than me, and I'm reading this, going, and I think the way it's written, he only uses the last names. I walk by Brick, Freeman, Porter, Vance, and Fraley, and I'm like, that is my life. That is my life in one sentence, and it was awesome.
Oh, you even hit the some of the industry things like the voiceover body shop or whatever it's called.
Yes, the voiceover body shop, VOBS. Yeah.
Chuck and Stacy were mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, it was, Landon was very, I guess the best word would be respectful. He just wanted to get things right. And he's like, okay, if I mention this, is that something that people in the industry usually talk about? If I mention that person, is that the appropriate person to talk about? At one point, he mentions some famous directors, and I've worked with pretty much every famous director in the industry. So I'm like, well, yeah, you can use that person, or you could use this person because they actually won a Grammy for directing an audiobook. And bless his heart, he made those changes, It was, there's a wonderful word that I like to throw around because, hey, I read books. It's the word verisimilitude. And, Landon really wanted that for this title, and he achieved it.
Yeah, the details are amazing, and it rings true with we voice actors.
That's Scatworthy.
We are talking right now with Landon Beach, author of the psychological thriller Narrator, and we have Scott Brick, the narrator of the book Narrator, on with us. And Scott, we're going to get you on a cold read challenge coming up in just a few minutes.
Oh,
yeah, it's one of the features we do here on the podcast, and we have so much fun. So I've set you up for success. So just get ready for it in just a few minutes. But Landon, I want to go back to you and ask, how much input does a writer have on selecting a narrator? And two-part question. When you write, do you write with a consideration of it will be narrated, or do you just do it in a vacuum? Two-part question.
So the answer to the first part is sometimes an author will be able to have some input into who they're going to have to be their narrator. As an independently published author and an owner of my own business, Landon Beach Books, LLC, I have to reach out to professionals to see if they are interested in working with me. For instance, I don't have a publicist who would naturally have reached out to both of you months ago and said, hey, there's a book about an audiobook narrator. Would you like to have this guy on? I've got to do all of that on my own just to get word out about the book. And I'm very grateful for the two of you hosting us today. This is really nice of you.
Absolutely.
But I have other friends who are traditionally published. And again, if you are at the apex of that profession, like Jack Carr, Brad Thor, John Grisham, Catherine Coulter, and the list goes on, of course, they choose who the narrator is, and that's set kind of in stone. And then there are others that say, Landon, I don't have any options at all. It's basically what my agent and publisher come up with. A couple of them were able to provide a dream list, but then they have to have an intermediary reach out and say, are you available to do this? Do you do these types of books? Is it in the right genre, the right wheelhouse, and on and on and on. So there's no definite answer. What I can say is that when I reached out to Gina Smith, who is Scott's incredible business manager, in the summer of 2019, I was fortunate enough to have her show Scott my first book, and he read it and liked it enough to take a chance on me. And it's just been a life-changing partnership since then. since that book came out, and it led to what Narrator is. Narrator does not exist if he doesn't say yes to that 3 years ago. So that's something that means a lot to me. In terms of, do I write with narration in mind? The first 3 books, I did not. I was very much in the mindset of, I'm just writing a book like I normally would. I'm not thinking about this being narrated or anything, because I didn't know a lot about the industry. I knew I loved audiobooks, and I've been a fan of Scott's for decades, but I didn't know anything about it. And so I was very much of the old school when I used my dialogue tags. Here's an example of he said or she said. And I like to do that because it really makes the writing better for the dialogue, because what's ever in between the quotation marks has to do the work. And I think that your writing is strengthened by it. But one thing that I didn't realize was that sometimes when I had some dialogue exchanges, because it's in the reader's head and the reader skips over those anyways, but when they're said, it was he said, she said, he said, she said, he said, he said, she said. And I think that it does interrupt the listen a little well, no matter how amazing Scott is or any other narrators, as throwing those away, because they know that the reader skips them when they read them anyways. And so after that, and I heard my work for the first time read by Scott, I consciously put in an extra edit to my work, which is I will read the book horribly out to myself when I'm going over it, and I will make sure that it is a nice, smooth listen for the reader. And it has made me a better writer, because it's helped me hone the point of view character better in those scenes. And I've been able to look at it and say, do I really need that tag? Have I established who's speaking well enough? So that is something I did not anticipate, and it's been a blessing to my work and my craft. And I still make mistakes, but just try to get better at it every single book. So yeah, that was unexpected that happened.
Well, that being said, let's talk dollars. Because in the dialogue in Narrator, Sean Frost, of course, was being casted for the book, and Scott, did the top narrators, is that true to life? Are there mega contracts? Are there percentages? Just curious.
Why, of course that's true. Every word in the book.
Can we see your check stubs?
My gosh, it was like Orson Welles just answered that.
Right?
I know.
Right, yes.
Brief digression. Years ago, I was being interviewed by the Wall Street Journal, and they printed how much money I make every year.
Ooh.
And it was not true. They wildly inflated the number. And I got a phone call later that day from a publisher saying, hey, we'd love you to work for us. And they offered me a rate that was significantly lower than I usually make. And I literally said, don't you read the papers?
Nice.
I pretended as though that number were true, and it became true the following year. So yes, I'm a big fan of saying, fake it till you make it, make it so. But no, there are numbers bandied about in the book, and I reached out to Landon, but as he so rightfully stated, he goes, this is where, we have to make it, this is where the storytelling comes in. People it will matter more if the number is higher. So I just said, okay, great. And I'm waiting for that number to come true.
So you had to Hollywood it up, huh?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's great. Scott, do you have access to your email as you're sitting here on the Zoom?
Oh, God. I think I know what's coming. Yes, I do. I have got my email open, my browser open in front of me.
Okay, I'm getting ready to hit send. We're getting ready to get Scott on a cold read challenge. And Scott, if you haven't heard any of our cold read challenges, it's basically what it sounds like. I send you a script, and you basically bust open the email, and then you start reading. Now, this particular writing should be done in the style of Sean Frost. if you don't mind. I just hit send on that email, so whenever you receive it, if you would, just open it up and dive in.
Okay, here we go.
Cold Read Challenge.
Deadlines. Written by Max Van Landingham. Read by Sean Frost. I was livid. It was a story too far-fetched to be believed, he said. Head publisher of Platypus Publishing. Sebastian Q. Mandrake admonished me for missing my October 20th deadline by 2 days. It was the final narration in the Brad Laramie Western trilogy, Cowboy Up, Brad Laramie's final ride. I lose my train of thought as I consider what the Q may stand for. Quinn, perhaps? Maybe another one of the many names that begin with a Q. I can only think of Quinn. Now, in my many successful years as an orator of stories, I've certainly dealt with my fair share of deadline challenges. There was the harrowing Chupacabra incident of 2009. Of course, no one trusts my account of the events that transpired in June of that year. I don't miss deadlines of my own accord, and I had been attacked by a goat sucker in my booth. The calamity and chaos caused by El Chupacabra in 2009 cannot be dismissed so cavalierly. As I recount deadlines I've missed, I'm reminded of the tragic bass fishing accident in 2004. Previous to my booth run-in with the goat sucker, I was slow rolling buzz baits with Kenny Rogers on Old Hickory Lake. Yes, that Kenny Rogers, R.I.P. gambler. You see, Old Hickory is a flotsam riddled lake 8 miles east of Nashville as the crow flies. The debris, muck, and mire provide favorable coverage for lunker bass, but also coverage for lake monsters. Suffice to say, that was another missed deadline that was unavoidable. Finally, now, present day, I have missed another deadline because of no fault of my own, and no one, not even my faithful golden retriever companion Michael, believes me this time. The reason? Booth dick.
Oh my gosh.
I can't believe you did that to me. I thought we were friends. Were we not hanging out just a few weeks ago in Switzerland? Were we not
We were.
just,
Was it too much?
chatting amiably, sharing meals, and now you go and throw El Chupacabra and Booth Dick at me?
And how about poor Michael, our golden retriever?
Michael. I want a Michael.
Oh my gosh.
Landon, real quick question. Are you looking at a series for this by chance?
Well, without giving too much away, we'll have to see how Sean does in this book, if and when people check it out and read. But something in this universe, I think I would be open to again, and I have some ideas about that. You never know.
Cool.
There's a really great thing for those of you out there who have not read all of his books, listened to all of Landon's books. He sets them in a loosely connected universe. Anybody who's read or listened to the Great Lakes saga, you'll hear some familiar voices and names. And Clive Cussler has always done the same thing, and a number of authors actually have. There's even like in the Bourne series, it's I call it the Beachverse, right? It's the Beach universe, and it's really cool. So I'm hoping, plug, shameless plug, that when Landon gets back to writing the 5th volume of the Great Lakes saga, that somebody's listening to an audiobook by Sean Frost. You never know.
Absolutely. What a great book. Landon, thanks for coming on today. And Scott, thank you. Landon, where can people download or listen to Narrator?
Yeah, so an easy way is to go to my website, landonbeachbooks.com, and I have links for all of my books. But in terms of the 3 versions, the Kindle version is exclusively on Amazon, and the paperback is Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart, a variety of stores. But the audiobook is wide. So anywhere where audiobooks are sold, you can have Narrator and my other books, all 6 of them performed by Scott in 30 seconds.
Well, we hope you submitted for Audies, or are going to. I don't know what the deadline is. And good luck, because this is a great, great thriller.
Thank you. I did submit it for 2 Audies for Scott, and I'm excited about it. And what I hope for, what any author hopes for, is just that it'll be given a fair shot against all the other traditionally published novels as well. And as long as it's given a fair shot, I know what the book meant for Scott and myself, and it was never about awards. It was about the relationship we had and a product that we wanted to put out, which I couldn't be happier with. But it would be neat to see that recognition, because I couldn't believe Scott's performance.
Do you guys have anything entered at Silvis?
Not at the moment, no.
I'm not sure. I don't think they've announced the.
They started to yesterday.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, and then it was pulled back. I think it was somehow it got released early.
Well, they also, the Audies tends to make announcements, a day at a time. Here's some of the nominations. Here's more of the nominations. Here's more. The Silvis may be doing that. I know that one of the publishers I work with, we did the Philip Marlowe series by Raymond Chandler, and I know that's been submitted, so fingers crossed it winds up getting nominated. We'll see.
Cool.
Thanks,
That's
guys.
what we're hoping for, too. And this Silvis award-winning podcast will conclude at this moment. And maybe we'll see you guys in L.A. in December, Scott.
I look forward to it. That'd be great.
Thank you so much for having us on, Kevin and Bobby. It's just been wonderful to meet you, and a pleasure talking with you today.
You as well. Thank
It's
you.
a privilege. Thank you.
To all of our listeners, go get Narrator, the thriller. It is amazing. It is a psychological thrill ride that you will not be able to stop listening to. It's amazing. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye, friends.
Let's see
Bye,
both.
guys.
Take care.
Oh, we're the Middle Class VO Podcast. Middle Class VO